After independence in 1960, Somalia enjoyed a period of stability and was even labeled the Switzerland of Africa. But democracy did not last long. General Siad Barre seized power in a military coup in 1969, and his dictatorship ran for 22 years, backed by the United States and the Soviet Union. His ill-fated war with Ethiopia ended in failure, and his allies abandoned him. Barre's rule became more and more brutal, and tribes across the country rose up against him. His eventual fall from power triggered the civil war that continues today. Al-Shabaab still controls large parts of the south of the country, and the northern region that declared independence in 1991 as Somaliland maintains its separation from the rest of the country.
وهاد باليس كنت ليك باكو طاطي حاولوا ساعد بفرط المقرنسة إنكم بتوقع تبلع ويرادن رحمتي أديات بيرادن
وأجري قار ميلوين دولار دقي لك عي بابورتي عيوتين وكل انتي سالقوا يوش هيردن وحكلوا جرتي تدك هانتي دوده ويجوا الله بحسن يوم بكريسة وضبط شارك ولا طلابية لبوبي يقول لك قاضي أي جرتي يا وأجرتي بيرها دول بيرنا oo laga wada qaatay mashiinadii
wada kormaya waxay ka qarxay meel dagaalkii ku salko sagaashankii burburka Soomaaliya ayaa aniga kuriya kala miino taasi markaa iga soo gadhay waxyeelada halkan Hargeysa airport
إلا دجال كسعود عديد على مهدي ويسكفي عناد أفرت بلو دجال قبلي أو حنبا كدعي على مهدي عديد بربر كان بدي سداسي كسو جارت وياهم بدي كومدعين كارو أما بوين كان لو دجال ما إنكستو إد جرين لاين ميشان إد كفينا زنالة حد ودعي لبض خوائل أي جرتي مركز كان جوكتينه مركي أركان دباتدان oo dadkan walaalahooda dagaalamay ayagan wax ka qawayseen waxay isku dayeen masaajidaha inay galaan masaajidii ku jiri waayeen waxay isku dayeen inay dalka ka dhoofaan cadalle meelahaas ay geereen way dhoofeen badin way
As the civil war dragged on, Somalis experienced violence and instability on a grand scale as the country's infrastructure collapsed. Public and private property was robbed or destroyed. Hundreds of thousands of Somalis were affected nationwide, and they left the country as economic migrants or fled as refugees.
At the time I was 5 years old, we had to flee our country immediately because of the war and came to Kenya, the refugee camps in the neighboring country of Kenya. And I knew, even though at such a young age, something was going on. You could hear, shootings, and you could see all these people traveling and trying to run away too. You hear the stories of the elders telling us about there was a civil war going on, people getting killed.
Well, as a kid, I used to ask my parents why we in the refugee camp, and the answer was, because of the civil war that happened in 1991, which was, the year that I was born. Life in the refugee camp was kind of hard, harsh, and kind of difficult, to live in. But my mom and my dad, they never gave up, and even though we were in refugee, which, the definition, of refugee, is clear and, concise. But as a young kid, I remember a little bit about it, which were getting up every morning, living in a small house, with with a big family. It was always a strange, thing to wake up every morning and see, your loved ones going through, harsh.
So many people coming in every single day, and the pain and the tiredness and it was just not. It was just this dusty bowl of place where, I mean, it was just so hot and so dry and no trees. It was just sand everywhere. I remember that, and very small huts, and the family crams in to sleep at night because it gets cold at night too, even though it's hot during the day. I remember that just a lot of kids crying and a lot of people that are going back and forth and walking and talking loud. And there were the UN trying to give some food and some stuff, shelter, but it was not enough, and I just remember it being so crowded and really harsh and tough. Yeah.
There are more than 1.1 million people displaced from their homes and their original places of living. 1.1 million people. There's certainly nearly that same number who are reliant upon food assistance from United Nations agencies and other donors, nearly 1 million people who cannot meet their own food needs. Until I arrived in 2013, our office was really based in Nairobi. Since then, we've been based in Somalia, and not just in Mogadishu. We have now offices across Somalia. The United Nations has about 1,500 staff working across Somalia. Here in this camp, this is the headquarters of the United Nations Assistance Mission in Somalia, but also the base of all the UN agencies, funds and programs who can find a home here as well. From here, we operate at a field mission. This is a mission people come to because they're committed to making a difference, committed to helping people enjoy a better life.
Somalia is a member of the Arab League, from which it receives aid and other support. But there doesn't always seem to be a clear plan for the support it provides, and the aid can sometimes find its way into the hands of opposing factions.
Somalia is a member country in the Arab League, and it has been that for the last 40 years. And those difficult years, the Arab countries were the foremost runners in support, particularly the people of the Arab, not necessarily the governments, but the people-to-people support has always been very prominent.
Arab countries are not absent in Somalia. They are building mosques, they are doing this, they are doing that, they are doing this, okay? But there is no national vision for the country. What they can say is they can put $1 billion on the table and they said, Somali people, you have to choose the government you want so that we can help you build your institutions, okay? They put money into politics. In 2012, they did. That's how the current guy came to power. Much like the African Union doesn't have any authority over AMISOM because it's the EU and the US that financially supports them and logistically supports them. The Arab League, in my opinion, is almost an African Union that's powerless, but it has resources.
Those who can't afford to seek asylum in the West seek refuge in neighboring countries, but the grass is not always greener there.
dabeedna anigu waxaan beertay beertan waxaan dadkii markii hore u qaxay Djibouti marka halkaa waxaan deganaa muddo haddii la yidhaahdo 20 sannadood ayaan deganaa bacda 20 sannadood waxay igu xubaatay Djibouti dabeedna waan soo guuray anigii carruurtaydu waxa weeyaan 4 carruura 3 hablood iyo inan iyo hooyadood markii aanu soo guurnay halka waxaan bilaabay beertaydii inaan beerto yaa waxaan ka qoday ceelka lacag fara badan baa iga
Ethiopia is now home to 4.6 million Somalis, and over 2 million more live in Kenya. In the Arab world, Yemen has the most Somali refugees at 200,000, followed by the UAE with around 50,000. In Western countries, Canada is home to 150,000 Somalis, followed by the UK with around 100,000, and then the US with 85,000.
I was born in a city called Galkayo, like kind of like Texas in Somalia. People make a lot of jokes, wonderful city. But I grew up in Mogadishu. Family was there. Everyone was family. We had neighbors. We played soccer so much. I was great, I would say that.
Somalia, I remember, is my elementary schools, my secondary schools, the beautiful days where I used to go cinema, where I used to play football, where I used to go libraries, where when Somalia was Somalia, because there was a Somalia.
I remember Mogadishu, and I remember the time when my family wanted to immigrate and leave the country. It was around the year 1987, and when my mother made plans to take me and my younger brothers and sisters out of the country. And the reason was because that was the beginning of the political strife or the end game, and we as a family wanted to stay together, and this was my mother's plan. And I remember speaking to my stepfather and him telling me that, you know, we're gonna go to a place called Europe, and that Europe is a difficult place to live. It's gonna be a totally different environment than the environment you live in, and that you must now become the man of the family because he will not be with us.
I fled from Somalia because my family was involved in politics. My dad spent years and years in jail. So are my brothers and some family members. Most of them fled to Saudi Arabia, some of them to Ethiopia. I even was in Egypt at one point or another.
Cairo was the only country I could fly for without visa. So I was stopped there and plan strategy. Where do you go from there? It's a long story. I went to Moscow, I went to Finland, I went to other places, but the destination always was to come to UK.
By the time we left, there was no civil war in Mogadishu. We flew out of Mogadishu International Airport on a Somali airline flight, and these things don't exist anymore. And we watched the war on TV, but the experience we shared with our relatives, they all experienced the war, they experienced the refugee camp.
One of the first things that I remember when I first arrived in this country was how, you know, the roads are being built, and with all these cars, you know, crossing each other, and being from, you know, coming from a refugee camp where, you know, there's not even cars, you know, like maybe 2-3 cars that you'll see a day, was here, you know, was a big thing, you know, and I asked myself, how are they controlling, and the lights, you know, that control themselves is one of the things that, you know, that missed me.
The very first moment, I think, was JFK, New York. It was just a big airport. We landed, and we had maybe about 45 minutes before we loaded, till we actually got into our new plane to Minnesota. It was just grand buildings, amazing. I mean, even though I was in Nairobi, and Nairobi is a metropolitan, but it was even bigger than that, just a bigger scale, huge airport. And we didn't go outside to, climb up to the airplane. It was just, we just walked into this little attachment and we were in the airplane already. Meeting my brother-in-law and my sister and some other friends that came with them to give us a ride home. And the next thing I remember was the next morning. We looked out the window. It was magnificent. It was in May. It was beautiful. It was just, everything was green. Everything was like very new. The window of our apartment was right next to this little, hill. And I just remember looking out and seeing deer kind of walking about. And I was like, is that really a deer? Asking, my siblings, and we were just looking at it in awe and, surprised them.
لما أنا جيت على هنا ما كان عندي أي فكرة، يعني جيت وجلست عند خالتي بس ما كنت أدري بالضبط إيش اللي الهدفي في الحياة بصراحة. وبعدين أخذت حوالي يمكن سنتين وأنا أفكر في الموضوع وأطور من لغتي، أطور لأنه لازم تيجي تعادل، ما يمديك إنك تيجي من بلد ثاني بدون ما تعمل access course وعشان تقدر تكمل مرة ثانية. دخلت كوليج وسويت life science يعني intense biology, chemistry and math. وبعد ما خلصت قدمت على University of East London وتقبلت على طول.
I think we're all guilty when it comes to Somalia, I really do. And I think the only decent thing we have done as the British has been to allow Somalis to come here and settle in Britain. But that's hardly a solution.
The Somali community in the UK has been in existence since long before even the state collapsed. The oldest Somalis came as sailors in the merchant marines at the end of World War II. But since state collapsed, then we've had the move of people into the country. And some are quite well integrated, and some are still struggling. But as a community, generally as a community, the Somali community is suffering, I think, quite a lot from a lack of integration, which is caused not just by their own kind of difficulties in learning the language or figuring out sort of so-called British life, but it's also about structural exclusions that are put in place. So it's very difficult for them to find jobs. It's very difficult for them to settle their immigration status. It can take years to actually gain citizenship.
When you are outside of the United States, the treatment you receive from the United States might be very different than the one you receive from when you are in the country. In this country, I haven't seen any interference of the government doing anything bad to the Somali people in Minnesota, for one. The community has been welcoming. Obviously, there are small tensions that every now and then happens, but predominantly, the Somali community here has been welcomed. The community has been very welcoming, and everyone is allowed, if you want to work hard, the opportunity to succeed.
When we came here, they give us a green card, where they will tell you, that you have 5 years legally to become a citizen, and the first 3 years, it's just to show that you care about the country, that you're giving back to the economy, you're working hard, you're not being criminal, and immigrants are hard workers, as they always been, and take big part, which we are a country of immigrants.
Now that's very limited. Since September 11, things kind of change and it's very different. So now most of the people that come either as a resettle, as the UN agencies resettling families in the United States, or the visa process, which is an immigration process, not a refugee program.
Somalis who only reach neighboring countries, however, have more acute problems. After a spate of attacks by al-Shabaab in Kenya, the government there began ordering Somalis out of the cities and back into refugee camps. Some were even sent back to Somalia. Others were so desperate, they fled to war-torn Libya.
In Libya, people are not being welcomed as refugees at all. They are being deported continuously. I'm talking about Libya. People who are desperate enough to flee to Libya, to cross the Mediterranean, and being trafficked as a product. If you don't pay the money they want, first hand will be cut. Then next order, if you don't pay, second hand will be cut. We always see people going around looking for money, collecting donations, so they can save those refugees who fled to Libya, who are now being enslaved in the camps or in farms, rather than being welcomed as a refugee.
My experience was different. It was an experience of being a middle-class family in Mogadishu, having a lot, and then coming to London and being refugees and having nothing, and living on welfare. That was very traumatic.
saamaynta dee way saameeyeen dad wayna ka dhinteen waana ku naafownay adduunka waana lagaga qaaday dhima geelgey anigu waan lahayo kan ka badnaa waa lagaga qaaday walkuna naga qaadan garanaysa marka wallahi aad bay dhibaatooyinku nooga soo gaadheen marka ma ka sikraatay wixii keenay dagaalka marka canugyar baan garanaysa laakiin saameyn badan buu nagu yeeshay aad iyo aad nafta iyo maalkaba saameyn badan nagu yeeshay
Hassan Abdullah's wounds may never heal. But coming up in part 2, Abu Kir Awalla does find redemption through his deeply personal campaign against the addictive drug, qat.
Waxa igu dhacay waxaan bartay qaadka. Waxaan cunay qaad. Sababta waxaan arkay dadkii oo dhan cunaya, waxaan isir waa dhaqanka Soomaalidu ka mid yahay. Shaqo la'aan baan ahaa. waan cunay 1 bil 2 bilood 3 sano 4 sano heer waxaan gaaray uu gaarsiiyo meeshii ugu hooseysay oo noloshayda gaar oo ah
Somalia's long-running civil war resulted in a terrible famine and a wave of refugees fleeing the country. Most ended up in refugee camps in neighboring Ethiopia and Kenya, but many set their sights further afield. After lengthy and often dangerous journeys, they reached destinations in the UK and the US. Now, part of the Somali diaspora, they still have strong attachment to Somalia and its people. They often do their utmost to improve the lot of the Somali communities they live in and the new refugees who followed them across the world.
The one thing that I'm very proud of, and I will tell my children and my grandchildren if I live long enough, is that when I was new to America and I just became a citizen, I got involved in a process to redistrict the city of Minneapolis. Now the redistricting happens every 10 years. And it happens after the census, because when you do the census, you realize some areas have increased in population, others have decreased. And by law, every ward or every district in the city has to have the same population. Otherwise, you can't have the one-man, one-person vote. So we took part in the process in 2012 to redistrict the city. Because what they asked for, the Charter Commission or the body that was creating the redistricting, they asked for input by the community. So I created a group called Citizens Committee for Fair Redistricting. And I called for the creation of 2 districts, 2 opportunity districts, one for the Latino population of our city, so for the Spanish-speaking population, and the other for the East African population, the Somalis, the Oromo, the Ethiopians. And that was taken up, and you can say that we were the godfathers of the map of the city of Minneapolis.
In 1996, I moved here from Washington, D.C. to work with the refugees I have seen in the camps, because I was a volunteer over there at some point for those few months I was there. So I knew the challenges that they will face here. So I came here, I became an interpreter, I became a I become a counselor, I become a cultural broker. I would help Hennepin County or government agencies that provide services like Hennepin County Medical Center, courts, welfare services, human services. We would train them or help them get Somali-speaking personnel so they could address the issues that the new Americans were facing. And it's not really easy to be Black, Muslim, and immigrant. It's a package, so that means more work and more advocacy.
I work with refugees and immigrants in my work, line of work. I'm always, drawn towards that line of work because I identify with the refugees because I was a refugee myself at once. I sympathize with what these people go through. When you are just uprooted from your country and you are landed in a foreign country where you don't share the same language, same culture, climate's very different. Somalia is very hot, kind of almost semi-desert, to a very cold, like Minnesota weather. So I'm always sympathetic with refugees and trying to give them my piece of advice and any support that I can provide. I'm very fortunate that I'm able to do that while earning a living and working. So this is my job and I'm very happy with it and proud of it.
One of the obstacles to rebuilding Somali society and a threat to its communities abroad is a stimulant called qat. It's illegal in countries like the UK and the US, but widely used in the Horn of Africa, including Somalia. Abu Kir Awalla is a Somali living in the UK who's dedicated himself in recent years to campaigning against the use of qat.
It was a dream coming here to UK. I came here July 1997. I was a young man. I had big dreams. I wanted to be something. I want to go universities. I want to make my family and fathers and my mother happy. Laakiin waxa igu dhacay waxaan bartay qaadka. Waxaan cunay qaad. Sababta waxaan arkay dadkii oo dhan cunaya. Waxaan isiri waa dhaqanka Soomaalidu ka mid yahay. Shaqo la'aan baan ahaa. Waan cunay 1 bil, 2 bilood, 3 sano, 4 sano. heer waxaan gaaray uu gaarsiiyo meeshii ugu hooseysay oo noloshayda gaar oo ah inaan masjid ku xirano tukan jirin oo shaqaysan jirin oo aan xay ahayn oo aan happy ahayn oo aan qosli karin oo hankii iyo kalsoonidii iga qaaday 2014 baan iska joojiyay.
The United Nations Development Program has highlighted that one of qat's biggest dangers is its use by young Somalis. 40% of Somalis chew qat, and 70% of those are under the age of 30. Qat's use has serious social and economic effects. Unofficial estimates say that Somalis spend as much as $1 billion a year on qat, while the average income per head in the country is only $600 a year.
So 2014 wali waan xasuustaa 2014 bishii Febraayo 14 bariyahaas waxaan ahaa nin xoogaa isku buuqsan oo xanaaq badan oo dagaal badan wax walbana waan ka xanaaqi jiray dadkana waxaan u malayn jiray inay aniga xamanayaan marka dhowr mar baan dagaal galay niman hore isu dagaalnay baa halkaas iyo halkaas torre iga geliyey iyo halkaas ambalaaska meesha igu yimid anigoo meel walba dhiig iga da'ayo afka qaad igu jiro ma sidaana rabta inaad ku dhammaatid ma sidaana ma this is it ma waxaanaad noqotay where is the boy biilkii big dreams ka lahaa habeenkaas waan ooyey took wudu waan tukaday ilaahay baan baryey alxamdulilah.
Whatever the actual figures, and despite the chronic economic and humanitarian situation in their country, Somalis undoubtedly spend millions of dollars a year on cut. So Abu Kir Awalla launched his Somalia Without Cut campaign in the UK.
There is a place called Mini Mogadishu. Mini Mogadishu is full, used to be full of marfishes. Marfish is where you sit down, men sit down, circle, and they're chewing gum, drinking a lot of tea, Coca-Cola, and talk about the problems, the walls, so many nonsense. Those days it was fun because I was in it. Now when I look back, it's rubbish. But it's a night, it's from late afternoon to whole night. You go next morning, your bones are aching, you have a severe headache, you're regretting, why did I go to sleep? Why am I doing this? And I've been doing that for 7 years. It's a circle of life, and when you get into it, the way out is very difficult. It's been 11 years now. I got a job within 1 year. I got a family. I start smiling. I start dressing up. I start going mosque. I start, being confident. Then I thought, if I am lucky, what about caruurta kale Soomaaliyeed? What about kuwa soo koraya oo u haysta qaabka inuu wax fiican yahay? And that's how I started this campaign.
Awalla aimed to end the cut trade and its use in the UK. Despite fierce opposition from cut dealers, he succeeded in persuading the British government to ban the substance in June 2014. His success prompted Awalla to take his campaign to the streets of Somalia itself.
It took us 9 years, but we never stopped it. And every obstacle, we find a way. If you want a man who can give you your dreams, a man with beautiful smile, a man who can make you happy, a man who can be a role model to your children, don't marry a man who chews crack. And if every Somali girl says, I'm not gonna marry a man who chews crack, then that means that will be a lot of pressure.
We purchase 430 million a year from Ethiopia. So it is a drug we have to minimize. Otherwise, it will, ruin our economy. And Somaliland can be out of poverty within 10 years. Yeah. Because we can save 116 million that's used for something that's not useful for the country.
There are challenges, big problems. In Mogadishu, in Puntland, drug dealers, multimillionaires. Only in one day, Mogadishu. One day, Mogadishu alone, 600 boxes of card comes. Each box equals $450. With that money, almost 300,000 a day, someone who's collecting every day cash. If you say, I'm here to make you problem, he will hire anyone. And in Somalia, it's very easy. Someone will kill you for $500. Kenyans told me, you ruin our business in here. You are an economical terrorist to us. And if you go Somalia, we will shut you up.
Another factor in rebuilding Somali society is tribalism. With the collapse of government, Somalis turn to their clans to fill the void. Tribes provide food, protection, and conflict resolution to many Somalis. But tribalism can discriminate against those outside the tribe, and can also extend beyond Somalia, Ethiopia, and Kenya into the Somali diaspora.
احنا عندنا لغة واحدة تختلف اللهجات، بس نفس الشيء هنا في UK، يعني عندهم اللهجات تختلف من منطقة لمنطقة، بس عندنا ديانة واحدة، عندنا لغة واحدة، احنا كلنا شايفين، العالم كله شايفنا كشخص واحد، بس من ضمن الصومال نفسها في عندنا قبائل تختلف، فالقبائل هذه لها مكانات مختلفة. هذا الشيء اللي يخلينا نتضارب على مين يمسك السلطة.
And in that culture includes genealogy, which can be both unifying and divisive at the same time, depending on how you use it. When the colonialists used it as a wedge to divide communities, it destroyed them. When Somalis used it in the old way of kinship and families that share a lot of things together, it brought them together.
It's actually one of the reasons when I went to Somalia, I sat down, my family was telling me, don't go Mogadishu, are you crazy? Don't go Hargeisa, are you mad? Go Puntland and come back. You see, Puntland, I was born when I was a child. I grown up, I went to secondary, I grew up in Mogadishu. I know more Mogadishu than Puntland, but because of the current climate of the country, for my own safety, they were telling me that.
My family, my mother had 6 children, I was the oldest, and we ranged from, I was 9 to 9 months or something like that. So our age group were quite, we weren't that much older than each other. And we had 2 different fathers, and we were from 2 different clans. And me and my mother are from 2 different clans. And that's what Somalis are. They are relatives, they're all relatives, they marry each other. They marry each other when the civil war was happening, So it's more of a political conflict than an economic or socio-economic conflict.
It can be very divisive because you do get a lot of conflicts, arguments that can break out into conflicts between clans and sub-clans and sub-sub-clans. They almost endlessly divide. But also the clan is a wonderful form of insurance, because if I arrive in London and I'm from a particular Somali clan, I will find my Somali clan brothers and sisters and they will look after me. If I don't have any money, they will give me money to maybe start a business and maybe I'll pay it back. If I don't have anywhere to live, they will help me find somewhere to live. So they really, really look after each other.
ilaa waqtiga 20 iyo dhowrkan sano oo burburka waddan ku jiray iskaashatooyinku way shaqaynayeen. midda kale waxa kalluumaysatada Soomaaliyeed waxay hiwaayad u leedahay ma lahan qabiil iyo iska horimaad iyo dhibaatooyin kama dhicin macnaha kalluumaysatada. waxaad arkaysaa nin halkan ku dhashay Cabdicasiis ku dhashay inuu Boosaaso ka soo kalluumaysto oo xilligiisa ku soo qaato oo haddana soo noqdo maxay ahaato waddankiisa magaaladiisa uu soo noqdo asiba waxba la gaarsiin asan wax dhibaato ku dhicin.
And certainly in the way in which we, in my company, the fishing company that is based here, Pontus, we are aggressively of the view that it's good for business to employ people from all of the social groups in this country and not just from one. It makes for stronger business, stronger company, and greater prosperity.
People are realizing, I'm glad there is an organization called Anti-Travelism Movement. They have a base here in London and America. They are based in Mogadishu, in Puntland, in Kalkayo, and they are going to schools and they are telling we are brothers and sisters. We can marry each other. You can like me, although I'm not your tribe, because I like you. You know, they're doing dramas, shows, they are writing articles, they are using social media. So there is a lot of good changes. I see hope.
المنظمة هذه لما بدأت أنا تعرفت على الشباب عن طريق كانوا بيسووا زي الاجتماعات صغيرة إنه إحنا نبغى نبدأ شيء زي كذا. ما كان هدفهم الوحيد إننا نقضي على التعصب القبلي، بس إنه عشان يصير عندنا رول مودلز، عشان يصير عندنا ناس يعني يهتموا للقضايا الصومالية بكل نواحيها يعني، ومن ضمنها كان التعصب القبلي. فأنا ما ترددت، أنا يعني ما كنت من أوائل المشتركين، بس إنه دخلت وساعدتهم. بعدها بسنتين صار عندنا كنا نعمل إيفنتس في لندن، وبعدين رحنا بريستول، برمنغهام، يعني تنقلنا في أكثر من مكان هنا في UK. وبعدين صار عندنا شعبية أكثر مع الحكومة نفسها. قبل سنتين ديفيد كاميرون جاء عندنا، يعني صار في زي الترابط، فصار في سمعة كويسة من بين المجتمع الصومالي اللي موجود هنا.
Some critics, however, accuse the movement of allowing itself to be used by the UK government to persuade Somalis to return home.
I came back, I was there 6 months ago, and I cannot wait to go back. Miss in a sense of, you know, leaving there, my family, it's not time yet, but I would love to go there and do whatever I can to pay back my childhood memories, what Somalia has gave me, my free primary school education, my free secondary school education, my free uniforms and books, and you know, everything was almost free, government paid for. And I owe to Somalia to give back. And the best way I can is do what I do my best, which is the CAT campaign.
لو الصومال فعلا المجتمع الدولي اتحد وحاول انه يحسن منها، وصار زي ما قلت انه ناس بتحب انه الصومال والصوماليين انها تصير دولة كويسة، انا كنت حشوف نفسي بعيدة تماما عن التدريس، وكنت حابة ان انا اشتغل مع وزارة الصحة على اساس انه يصير عندها دافع اقوى، وعشان نسوي بحوث اولا. كنت ابغى اكون باحثة ادرس الاسباب اللي تخلي الناس تمرض اكثر شيء قبل ما اننا نوصل اوكي خلينا نبني مستشفى، فابغى اعرف الروت بالاول. فانا شايفة نفسي كباحثة في الصومال في كل القرى، اعرف كل قرية ومشاكلها. ما ينفع اننا يعني نشوف على statistics صارت من 2000 وحجرة زي ما يقولوا بالسعودية 1990 something، عاد آخر مرة صار في بحث طبي بالصومال. فإحنا محتاجين شيء عصري، شيء إنه نقدر إنه يعني كدولة إنه نبني من الأساس. فأنا شايفة نفسي لو رجعت الصومال كباحثة بالأول.
It will happen, inshallah. It might not happen in 10 years, it might not happen maybe 20 years, but one day, the way it is now, my inside I cry sometimes when I see Galmudugland and Puntland and Somaliland and Jubaland and Kidaland, and Ethiopia is saying, well done to you, you are come here, you are my brother, but don't talk to him, that guy. Dividing and ruling and playing with them like little toys, it just breaks my heart. But inshallah, Somali people of Aqli, Haywan Ma, they know inshallah someday we'll come back, we'll be back.
Somalis being very intelligent human being, very forgiving and very entrepreneurial, they will build that. They're already in the process of building it. I don't know if it's going to be cost-wise livable for everyone, but for sure it will be built.
While Somalis abroad wait patiently for the civil war to end, they do what they can to support Somali communities around the world and contribute fully to their adopted countries. Presidential elections are planned for November 2016, but it remains to be seen whether they can bring change to an almost ungovernable country. But until peace is restored and the government can regain control of the whole country, Somalis have little chance of restoring the much-needed order to their country, which has eluded everyone for so long.